Now that Mario Day has come, you now have access to 100% of the Donkey Kong content on the Virtual Boy through NSO. Still, there are some nice treats to go over, along with the story of the Donkey Kong Country style game that never left the prototyping phase. I'm here to tell you what is and what could have been on the Virtual Boy when it comes to the Donkey Kong franchise. For brief context, this system was released in 1995, right in between the Super Nintendo's second wind and the 64's debut. The big selling point was the 3D visuals, not the sort of 3D visuals that the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 would showcase within the next 14 months, but the stereoscopic kind, but only in monochrome. This thing had a very short window to catch on, with its main selling point being the third dimension. That space got really competitive really fast, and the wacky little system did not meet the moment commercially. Looking at it in 2026, it's a pretty compelling mix of technology that feels simultaneously retro and cutting edge. You're going to be looking at footage here that just looks like a powerful Game Boy, but I would recommend you try it sometime for yourself if you really want to understand how the system feels. I never had one of these growing up, so it's not the nostalgia talking. It's a pretty impressive effect. I like the 3D on the 3DS well enough, but the isolation of the VB headset truly sells the immersion. The sprite-based visuals put this into a category of its own. This is a very distinct part of gaming history, and I'm glad they went through the trouble of reviving it. When the VB launched on the NSO, we didn't have any Donkey Kong content to experience, so I just messed around with the launch lineup. Now that Mario Day has come and gone, we can get into the nitty-gritty. Let's start with the title that launched with the unit, Mario's Tennis. Yeah, if you didn't know, now you do. The long lineage of Mario Tennis games started here. Technically, it started with tennis on the NES if you want to get nerdy about it, but Mario was just a cameo character there. We can see the Donkey Kong tribution on the front of the box. DK Jr. is holding a giant tennis ball in the artwork. He also has a drawing in the instruction manual, and come on, just look at this. These shoes are hilarious. I'm partial to the more childlike design of Jr. myself, but we have the aged-up version of the character here. This iteration debuted in Super Mario Kart, and the visual style in general seems to carry that same vibe. It is interesting to see that Jr. got into the series before any form of the traditional DK. I think it would have been cool to have that version of the character playable here, but we'll take all the Jr. we can get at this point. There's a lack of Bowser in this game, so Jr. is the slowest and strongest tennis player on the roster. He has the smallest racket contact area, so it can be pretty difficult to play in hard mode. The rest of the cast plays just like they do in the rest of the Mario Tennis games, except Yoshi's way cooler in this one. Kind of off topic, I know, but look at Yoshi eating his racket. They weren't just being funny in the manual either. That's literally how he spikes the ball. Anyway, the game itself is pretty simple. You just customize what sort of match you want and have at it. No story mode, no babies, just tennis. It's really nice to see DK Jr. with such a high pixel count too. Look at the grimace on his face when he loses a point. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to get the hang of this game, so I saw the animation a lot. I liked playing doubles and finally got the hang of it, nailing spikes and shots down the alley. When Jr. scores, he flexes for the camera before walking back to the line with a smile on his face that looks like Dad promised him a Happy Meal on his way home. It's crazy that they could pull off such a range of emotion in the sprite work. It's really something to behold. I know it probably sounds weird to be gushing about the graphics of a decades-old game, but I don't know, man, it's just nice to look at. I know the meme about the red colors too, but I really don't mind it. The game gets pretty engaging when you get the swing of it. I've been putting a little time into it every night, working my way through the doubles on the highest difficulty. The next appearance is a brief one. The system's main Mario game was Mario Clash. This one is really neat, acting as a sequel to the arcade Mario Bros. It sports 99 different levels, using a bunch of different Mario enemies to pack out the 3D levels. It's a solid evolution of the Mario Bros concept. While this game has a beginning and an end, there's still an arcade-era emphasis on your score. As you raise that score, you get a little congratulatory screen with cameos from all your favorite characters. When your score goes above 800,000 points, you'll see a little congratulations screen from DK and Jr. Nothing major, but a fun little cameo nonetheless. That's about it for Donkey Kong on the Virtual Boy as it was released. Things would have been different if it had achieved any semblance of commercial success, but the lack of enthusiasm from the market did not help as Nintendo shifted their focus toward making the 64 a success. As it stood, the Virtual Boy had only 22 games in total. Nintendo plans to increase that number with the NSO, but it's a shame nonetheless. Despite all the strange faults the system had, it's a really interesting machine. VR is not as much of a magic trick as it used to be, but this system had a retro feel to the immersive worlds that gave it a lot of charm. It's like the Game Boy. Outside of nostalgia, there's no reason to make games like this nowadays. The constraints of the system let the games take on an identity of their own, and there are a lot of unique games that could have existed, but now never will because there's not really a reason to design your game around the hardware limitations of the Virtual Boy, unless you're trying to make one of those fan-made emulator type games. It makes you wonder though, what would an original Donkey Kong game have looked like on the Virtual Boy? As it turns out, Rare was cooking up a prototype. In 2017, Digital Foundry interviewed a bunch of people people who worked on Donkey Kong in the 90s. Stephen Hurst recounted the work that went into the Virtual Boy. They took some of the Game Boy sprites from the Donkey Kong Land trilogy and explored what they could accomplish. They managed to create something that looked good, but it did not go much further than that. It was an arduous process to make the visuals work in 3D, and the Virtual Boy was not successful enough to warrant the effort. While the game started with sprites from Donkey Kong Land, I imagine they could have accomplished much more refined visuals. If you compare the looks of Wario Land from the Game Boy to the Virtual Boy, you can imagine what kind of glow-up DK might have received. Speaking of Wario Land, I think we get a little hint of what sort of mechanics they could have explored from that title. It's similar to the Wario Land games before it, but it had this neat feature where Wario would jump into the background of the level for exploration. Retro Studios would eventually implement some similar level design ideas in their first Donkey Kong. While you might think this was purely coincidental, there's a decent chance that the team had the Virtual Boy on the mind. Concept artist Sammy Hall had a couple of ideas in that beautifully red monochrome color. We can see some of the layers in one and projectiles flying toward DK in the other. It's great that some Virtual Boy coded features eventually made their way into the series, but it would have been incredible to get Donkey Kong Country on the system itself. I think Rare would have found a way to get the most out of the hardware per the usual arrangement. I can imagine 3D versions of those mini-games from DKC3 or jumping through the background where you could run along the treetops or find a secret cave. They could have pulled off some fun effects with debris being shot into your eyes the moment Rambi plows through the entrance to a cave. They could have even played around with the Kremlings getting bonked into the third dimension. Think of the fun twists they could do with the barrel segments. We eventually saw Retro play with the camera for these, but stereoscopic 3D would have provided quite the experience. The weather effects they used in the first Country would have looked great on the system as well. So many possibilities. We'll never know what could have been, but at least some of the concepts pioneered by Wario made their way into the series through returns. They even brought the background level concept to the Wii U version of Smash. The other game that really would have worked on the Virtual Boy was Arcade Donkey Kong. NES Returns did this amazing mock-up of what it might have looked like. Considering what they were able to accomplish with Mario Clash, I think they could have made something truly special here. The timing was a bit awkward with the Donkey Kong remake hitting the Game Boy in 1994, but I think they could have just as easily made it another arcade game starring Junior. Making the Condors or electric balls fly at Junior from a 3D perspective would have been really neat. So much unrealized potential for this unfortunate system. It was a victim of crunch, high expectations, and a lot of difficulty in consumer messaging. It reminds me of the more recent system failures like the Wii U and the Vita. I love those experiences for their unique features and great libraries of games, but without a solid track record of sales, the systems are abandoned in favor of moves that butter the bread of the shareholders. I don't begrudge Nintendo for doing what they needed to during one of the most competitive years in the industry, but I do mourn the death of what could have been. There's some cool fan projects that are bringing new games into the Virtual Boy format, but we'll always be left wondering what a 3D entry of our favorite series could have been. Metroid would have been crazy on the system. Oh well, at least we got the prequel to Metroid Prime Pinball. That's the extent to which I care about and cover sales on this channel. I don't lose sleep at night over how much profit Nintendo is taking home next quarter, but if a bunch of DK games flop, we probably aren't going to see a whole lot more of them. I don't think that's something we need to worry about, but sometimes the system can hold the game's success down, as it did with Tropical Freeze. With that, we lay the Virtual Boy down to rest. We love the oddball creation for what it was, not what it should have been. Good night, sweet friends.